Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say, and welcome to the Coronado Island Film Festival. We are streaming live on our festival YouTube, and we are so excited to have with us today. Or good morning, I should say, and welcome dynamic to the Coronado Island Film Festival. We are streaming. Well, and we're live and making mistakes already. No, just bear with us. It's a live stream. We might have a few technical difficulties. But this morning, we're just thrilled to partner with SAFE, an organization here on Coronado. If you're not familiar, they do tremendous work in tackling topics that are not always easy to tackle, and including suicide, bullying, drugs, so many things that our youth face today. And parents sometimes struggle to open up and talk to their children about. And so this organization's impact is really immeasurable. And the CEO and the executive director, Georgia Farrell, had reached out about partnering with us during the film festival on the film Social Dilemma. And I was so excited to be able to partner on such an important and relevant topic. We are all connected. We're connected right now. What we see, what we watch, it impacts our daily lives in ways that we don't really even realize. It's such an unconscious activity when we plug into our social media and a lot of the live content today. So it fits right in with our mission here at the Coronado Film Festival to really educate and inspire and enlighten through film, and to use it as a tool to educate people. So I'm going to introduce Georgia Farrell, and she is going to introduce the panel that is here with us today. So welcome, Georgia. So glad that you're joining us.
Thank you, Meredy. I'm so happy to be here as the executive director at Coronado SAFE. I just really want to thank the Coronado Island Film Festival for partnering with us on this special event. Coronado SAFE is a local small nonprofit, and we offer services and programs that remove barriers, cultivate hope, and empower youth and families to be resilient and thrive in our community. For more information about SAFE, please go to our website at coronadosafe.org. I'm super excited to introduce our moderator today. Her name is Tiffany Spitzer. We're so blessed to not only have her here today, but she has also recently joined the board of directors for Coronado SAFE. Tiffany's a Coronado resident who's very active in our community, and she's currently a stay-at-home mom with her 5-year-old son, Deacon. She's also married to Jacques Spitzer, who's a Coronado High School graduate. He's a CEO of Raindrop Marketing. One of the reasons I'm super excited to have Tiffany here today, because she is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. Before she became a mom, she was with NBC San Diego for 16 years. And at one point was the executive producer. So I'm gonna step aside and let Tiffany take over. And thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to hearing about your comments. Make sure that you type your questions that you have for our panelists in the chat, and I'm going to help monitor those questions for Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here and excited to be part of SAFE and Coronado Film Festival. I watched the Social Dilemma last night, and wow, I have to say there was a lot of new information for me. So I am excited to be here. I'm going to introduce the panel. We have a great panel of experts. We have John Moffat, who is our digital expert. He has been educating people of all ages in internet safety for the past 13 years, since MySpace. Who remembers MySpace? I do. He has presented to hundreds of thousands of youth, parents, youth service providers over the past 13 years. His goal is to help bridge the digital knowledge gap that exists between youth and their parents, one that is widening by the day. He's very excited to participate in the panel and also answer our questions and any of yours. We also have Karen Molina, who is the Coronado Middle School principal, and she has a bachelor's degree in psychology, dual master's in counseling and psychology, a master's degree in educational leadership, 20 years of experience in education, 10 years of teaching at both the elementary and secondary levels, and she has been the principal at Coronado Middle School since 2016. So she is definitely brings a lot of value to this panel on the education side. And then we also have Gia Del George. She is a licensed clinical social worker, and she'll be discussing the mental health implications of social media use and technology. She graduated from the University of San Diego. She studied psychology before receiving her master's degree in social work. And she is a believer in helping people to make connections, feel supported, and feel valued, especially when it comes to the relationships between children and their parents. So thank you all so much for being here. I want to just remind you, in the interest of time, you can keep your answers to about 2 minutes. If you go over, it's okay, but just be mindful of that. And again, if you have questions out there, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. So I'm going to start with John. Our first question, in your opinion, what is the most concerning part or problem with social media and technology today?
That's an excellent question. I think the biggest challenge is, again, that the knowledge gap between what parents know and what kids know. The social dilemma focused on what separates us as far as algorithms, but really inside the home, your kid could be doing a million different things and you wouldn't even be aware. And so what I focus on and what I encourage parents to focus on, don't be afraid to talk to your kids about technology, and more importantly, learn how they're using it. Because one kid using Instagram is different than another kid using it. Some people are just consumers and some people are creators. What is your child's interaction with it? And how could you help foster positive experiences within it? And really, as a parent, the biggest challenge we face is putting our phones down too, right? Because it's easy. Like, I love when I miss the days when I could present to people in person. And I would ask the kids, who here, raise your hand, has had a parent tell you to put your phone down? You're on it too much. And the kids raise their hand. Oh! And then I'll say, okay, who here has had a parent tell you to put your phone down while they were on theirs? I said, put it down, shut your face. Get off your phone. We've all experienced it. Like, I've done it with my kid. I've said, get off that. And he's like, you're on yours. And so the reality is we're wasting just as much time as they are. If you're a parent and you've told your kid, why are you watching people play video games on YouTube? That's dumb. Like, why would you do that? You could literally play the video game. And then your kid will say, why are you watching people buy houses? Because maybe I'm the only one that watched House Hunters in my life, but we waste time. So really, we are our kids' role models. The more we're out balancing things out. And I think what this pandemic has created is a challenge of, we're all stuck in this Zoom world. We're all stuck and anxious. And every time we turn on the television, it's not positive news, and it's making it worse. So the more we could disconnect and be as a family and separate it. I know one thing we do in our house is just have family movie nights where we watch a ridiculous, silly movie all together. Even if it's a movie I can't stand or I've seen 100 times, just to separate that. And the other thing, and I know I'm going on, is making sure you understand how they're using the apps and know what apps they're using. Final and really, really important.
Right. I think especially you brought up a good point where it concerns what each of your kids is watching and using, because of the algorithm, it could be very different for one child versus the next child based on what we learned, from the movie. I'm going to ask Karen now, as a principal, what do you feel is the most concerning part or problem with social media and technology?
So from the education perspective, and obviously I can talk about this from a million different perspectives, but sticking just to the education piece, my greatest concern really is the growing up in an environment where there's so much influence and there's so much need for us to be able to teach kids how to make sound personal decisions. And they're so influenced by what is on social media or what they're seeing with technology. One of the most important things about learning, and learning is very different than memorization. Learning is actually being able to critically assess information that you're given and to persevere through understanding it. What we see often now with students is that there's this need for immediacy. They want to know the answer right away. They don't want to chew on things and think about it. Whereas when we were kids, we had to go and find an encyclopedia, and that meant going to the library and looking it up. There was a whole process to it rather than it just being at our fingertips. And during that process, we had to problem solve. And so what we see now with learning is that this need for immediacy, this need for the ability to critically assess and really stop and persevere through the thinking is really challenging. And so, a lot of times people may say, well, get the kids off of the screen, at school. The fact is that technology is also an amazing tool, and curriculum is online for a reason. It allows for students to have really significant engagement. And there are opportunities to really keep them engaged and aware of what's going on rather than just kind of standing in front of them and just talking, because they don't attend to that as much as maybe we did, because that's what we were used to. Their neural pathways are very different, how they're being developed for their learning process. But I would have to say that my biggest concern really is the ability to stop, persevere, and really critically assess information without the influence of other things on social media or things on technology. I often tell parents, take a moment, ask your child a question that they're going to want to just go, well, I'll just look it up and I'll tell you in 2 seconds. Don't let them do that. Watch what happens to them when you ask them a question. Make them sit and think and chew on it without looking it up. It's always very interesting, but that's really my biggest concern when it comes to technology and social media in relation to education.
Yeah, it's really good advice. I feel like even as adults, we should challenge ourselves more not to go straight to Google for the answer, right?
Yeah.
Chia, I'm going to just ask you the same question because you're a clinician. So do you see differences? What do you find most concerning?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of the mental health implications of social media and technology, it's not even so much social media and technology being the problem. It's what we're doing with it, and always looking at, as a clinician, what is motivating our human behavior, and so watching teens go online to avoid or escape, that's a huge concern for me. Not being able to sit with something that might be uncomfortable for them. And so using that as a coping mechanism when there might be several other strategies that we might look at that are healthier. I also think that when and how we're using social media and technology. And so, there's such a rise in as the rise and increase of our use of social media and technology comes with all the psychological, I think, issues that we see today. And so we see a lot more kids becoming anxious and depressed, and unfortunately the rise in suicide rates, with that increase. Cyberbullying, things like sexting, like Karen had mentioned, our brains don't fully develop until they're 25. So our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for long-term decision-making and planning, is not developed for our teens. And so that, like Karen was saying, that immediacy, that understanding that what you're posting is there forever, and so I think that there are important things that we need to educate our children about. And then to also remember that Social Dilemma in itself, that documentary, does ironically psychologically manipulate us, about the dangers of social media. And so, just that I'm always about like balance and moderation. And so anytime, we're using anything to excess is when I'm going to say that is something that we need to look at.
Right. Like I remember in part of the film that the one he was talking about the bicycle and it being a tool. And so that's Karen saying it can be a great tool for kids, but then are those tools what's giving them the dopamine hits? Probably not. It's the things that we need to know what they're looking at, the algorithms and such. So it's definitely a two-sided coin. One of the things I think a lot of parents struggle with is their kids knowing more about technology than they do. And so, John, I'll ask you, how do you bridge that gap at home? How can you help parents? How can parents be as informed?
That's an interesting question and a good one. I have a middle schooler myself, and I do this for a living, and my son rolls his eyes at me every time I bring up a question about technology. And I love it because it reminds me of when I was a kid and I knew how to program the VCR and my dad didn't, and I'd roll my eyes at him. But the VCR is not going to destroy anybody's life, right? Like, I know how to program, that doesn't change anything. So what I tell parents is have a contract in your home about your expectations. And a contract, whenever I bring that up with kids, they always say, "What did I do wrong? Don't you trust me?" You know, the big T word. And I agree. And what I tell them is, do you know what a contract's for? Yeah, to make my life hell. No, a contract is to protect both parties. Has your mama ever just told you to turn off the phone for no reason? All the time. Well, a contract could help protect you in that. And so really the contract, when I talk to parents, is about getting everybody on the same page. You know, like when it comes to, you know, like it's one thing to understand they have this app on their phone and they use it, like Among Us is a popular video game right now. And parents will ask me all the time, is Among Us bad? No, it's a game, but it does have a chat feature that doesn't have a filter on it. So if you have an elementary school kid that you don't allow to watch PG or rated R movies, you might want to look over their shoulder and see how they're interacting with it, if they're interacting with strangers, because that's just the reality. And again, just because your kid uses the tool correctly doesn't mean everyone else does. So really what I always stress to parents is you have to make sure you open the lines of communication and that make it so they're not afraid to share stuff with you. Because I know my son, I do this for a living. I could have all the protections in place in the world, but if he's not comfortable coming to me when something inappropriate pops up, and it has, if he's not comfortable coming to me, it's just going to send him down a rabbit hole of insecurity, anxiety, and stress. Because kids tell me all the time, like, if my mom knew what I could see and what I've seen on X, Y, or Z, they wouldn't let me have a phone.
You
So
bring
they
up this
internalize it. And I'm sure Gia could talk more about that, like the internalizing and when you see that kind of stuff and what it creates. And we're already in an anxiety driven world where you're not having real life connections. And then you're going down a rabbit hole, whether it's on Discord, which is a chatting app between video game players, and you create communities, and you could find a community for anything, whether you're LGBTQ all the way to your most popular gamers. And if when you're anxious and your anxiety, you're reaching out trying to find a way to release it, and a lot of times you'll find a good place, but the internet, and you're not understanding how your kids using it, they can find a really negative place to release that energy. And so you have to be able to not only have these conversations, but know that they know they could come to you and not have it taken away. And I'm going to tell you, parents, average first exposure to pornography, for example, one study was 8 years old. So if you're not talking about it, they're talking with their friends. And I know when I was a kid, I had friends that had what we call inappropriate conversations, and I did too. And we heard rumors about Richard Gere and all different kinds of stuff that you may have heard too. And we didn't have the internet back then, or Rod Stewart, whoever it is. Well, now they could, like we mentioned before, you could just Google it right now and find out if it's true. And what you're Googling isn't necessarily true, but it's going to reaffirm what you're thinking. So you have all these kids going through all this, afraid to talk to their parents because it's going to get taken away, or it's going to be an awkward conversation. And then I'm not even talking about sexting, for example, where they're actually solicited or having somebody ask them, because we always talk about, you know, sexual harassment, this and that. Well, your kid could be getting sexually harassed sitting next to you on the couch. And if you don't have a relationship where you could talk about that kind of stuff, they're going to internalize it, and who knows how they're going to deal with it.
Right.
And that's why it's important we address this and talk about it.
So having communication, the contract is a really great idea. Gia, did you have anything you wanted to add on that? I know it's more like looking for the validation that kids are, if they're not getting, you know, they could be searching for it, and who knows where they're searching and where they're getting it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and I think that John touched on a lot of great points, you know, and I think it's really that idea that as parents, you do know your children best. You can recognize those changes in behavior and mood, and know that some of our teens are going to be more in that vulnerable state, much more susceptible to things like, you know, it's scary, but like online trafficking. That there are, you know, we teach our kids about stranger danger And that's most taught and recognized when meeting someone in person. But like social media, it breaks down those barriers. You know, your teen's having a bad day. They got into a fight with their parents, and it's like they post a picture on Instagram to make themselves feel better. And, you know, it just takes a stranger to just say, hey, I really like your picture. And that, you know, can set that foundation of like easing in to start talking. And, you know, and then suddenly your kid is caught up in this really scary kind of situation. But again, it's going back to, as parents, how do we address these issues in a way that isn't soliciting fear from our children or increasing more anxiety? You know, it's just that we're having these conversations, we're making aware of the things that can happen, and how do you set yourself up so you can manage those.
Right. That's great. I think, and I just want to remind people, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat and we will have time for it at the end. So please ask your questions if something pops up. Karen, I wanted to now talk to you about, because we've been talking about how, you know, there's confusion, or John, I think you may have brought it up, where it's like, is this thing that I'm using bad? And we're now in a space where we're all using technology. You know, kids aren't in school. So we're saying, here, get on your iPad, get on the computer, do your schoolwork. And the conflicting message of like, get off your phone, don't be on your screen, you know, that kind of a thing. Right. So what has the school district done any, in your opinion, how does the school respond to that? Or as an educator, how do you respond to that?
Sure. So, you know, the reality is, and they even said this in the film too, the reality is that, you know, technology is not going away. I mean, it's just going to become more and more integrated into our lives. And so, you know, and it's a matter of how we teach kids how to navigate it, and and it's our responsibility as parents and as educators to also support those regulations that are not necessarily in place at this time. Maybe, you know, parents and teachers and educators, we have to be the regulators at this time, so that we can really cultivate and promote family and personal values that are part of us as human beings. And rather than students and young people falling prey to this whole manipulation. So as educators, yes, I mean, it's our duty to provide students with digital citizenship, digital literacy, understanding bias and fake news. And really important too is their digital footprint. I mean, you know, there are kids who are posting things that they are not thinking about their futures. They're not thinking about, my gosh, that can impact my future career one day, because once it's out there, it's out there. So as far as our job as educators and as a school district, yeah, I mean, we have technology use policies. We have digital citizenship curriculum that we teach. I will say that I'm often putting out in my newsletters and district-wide Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media is one of the most wonderful websites to find great lessons to support students and young people, and to help parents to navigate all of this stuff too. But like I had said earlier, it is a tool. Technology is a tool that's really fantastic. And unfortunately with COVID, you know, this means that there is a lot of screen time, and there has to be downtime from the screen time. And we're not sitting in the same room as our students watching them navigate. Mm-hmm. We trust that they're navigating as we're navigating on our screen to show them. That's a real challenge, because typically teachers are watching from the back of the room to make sure, but kids are incredibly savvy. They can toggle quickly. And that a lot of that really comes from their inability to attend for long periods of time. And in time, with evolution, that's just the way that it's going to be. I mean, we see it now. It's very hard for them to attend to something that is not super engaging. So if you're a teacher that, you know, has the ability to to speak, and there is no need for technology, and you're entertaining, and you can really kind of keep them engaged through the way that you're acting and being and things, props and things like that, they'll stay with you. But technology gives us that tool of allowing them to shift their attention often to keep them engaged. But again, it's so important that we are regulating that. We have to be the regulators. Parents, teachers, educators, all of us have to be the regulators in teaching the kids. This is the direction you need to take this. This is when you need to know to stop looking at that, or know that that's not real. It's really a challenge. I will say that it's not going away. So we have to figure out, how do we regulate this with them, for them, so that they can really they can form their own opinions and really stick to those core human values that have nothing to do with artificial intelligence.
Right. I mean, as parents, we were, I'm assuming the four of us were raised without it. Obviously, it came much later in our life. So now, learning and then balancing and teaching children, are the values that we had as we were raised, but in a world of technology is so difficult. We're all kind of learning together, and parents are trying to stay one step ahead, and so it is definitely challenging. You brought up something about you, and I wanted to ask John about this, is, the fake news, media sources that are trusted, and, how do parents and kids trust the media sources we get our news and information from? I thought that in the movie, it was a great point. Google doesn't know when something is true or false. It just knows to find the information, right? So, John, do you have anything that you can speak to on that as the digital expert?
Right. And I think they mentioned it what's funny about the social dilemma that made me laugh is they did a really good job of scaring us for 2.5 hours. And then during the end credits, they're like, oh, by the way, you could try this, this, and this. And I thought that was hilarious.
The tips were great.
Right. I was like, oh, great. Why don't you just do a whole movie on the end credits? But that's because there isn't a lot of solutions, to be honest. The DuckDuckGo is a good one. The other sites where you could pop the bubble, the filter bubble we're in, like right now, Tiffany, you Google gun control and I Google gun control, our results are going to be totally different based on our previous searches. So popping the bubble and going to DuckDuckGo and the other web browsers that don't collect the data. And then the other thing you could do is the World Privacy Forum has an opt-out list of all the major data collectors. So you could actually, and I started this process the other day just to see how much of a pain in the bum it would be. It's a pain in the bum because you have to go to each individual one. And then they don't make it easy. Some of them's like, well, we need a copy of your driver's license. We need this and that, because data, like they say in the movie, it's more valuable than oil. The oil industry is more valuable, data collection. So they don't want to give it back. And so when I present at high schools, especially, and even middle schools, and I'm like, y'all have to fix this. It's going to a lot of be policy driven. That's going to change the way they're doing business. Because if I owned a social network, I wouldn't change anything until they made me, right? And so what we're doing, and I think Tristan Harris said this in a different thing I was watching, where he said, like, we're in an economy, this attention economy, where it's cannibalizing itself. This economy is eating the consumer, right? Because we're the consumer. So it's literally eating us alive. So it's not perpetual. It's just going to keep going in this cycle until someone goes, you know what? And it starts with each individual, like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't give this privacy. The challenge is, and I know California's law is trying to challenge this, but it's so weak, is the idea that if you opt out of the data collection, will you get the same experiences if you stay into it? No. Like, I've opted out of Google and all of a sudden it doesn't want to help me with, like, it makes it a little bit more challenging, not completely, but it makes it a little bit harder than it would if you didn't. If you have iPhones and you want to start sticking it to the man, unfortunately, you could use Apple Maps because they don't do the same kind of data collection, but you'll notice that it's not as good of an experience either. Mm-hmm. Right? And so it's the trade-off. What I think is going to end up happening, it's not as much policy, as there's going to be a company that comes along and does a subscriber model where they aren't relying on ads. And there's a couple social networks coming up. Unfortunately, most of them are driven with right wing or left wing. They're not something I would refer somebody to right now. They're sort of the cesspool, if you will. And so until one comes up where it's like, look, because the idea of fake news versus real news, you're in a bubble. Like, you want to confirm what you already believe. It feels snuggly and soft. You don't really want to. And that's just human nature. So all you can do now, like going back to the thing, is opt out of as much as you can.
Okay.
The first thing I would do is Google yourself and see what comes back and try to remove yourself from the first 3 pages.
Oh,
That's a
interesting.
good start.
Okay.
Like those directories where you could find your address right away,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 people, whatever. If you go to that World Privacy Forum and you just type World Privacy Forum, data brokers opt out, it'll give you a complete list of every single one, and you could just click through them and opt out individually. It's all in one place, making it very easy instead of like who has what information where.
Right.
I think the World Privacy Forum has done a good job of giving you a place where you could just go and start opting out.
Mhm.
And Axiom is one of the big ones, and there's plenty of others, and just start purging yourself of all of them and just see how the experience changed. Does it change? My favorite, when you're opting out, like it's like a bad breakup. Are you sure you want to leave, baby? You're not going to get customized ads, baby.
Yeah.
You want to leave? I mean, come on, we've had a thing for a long time.
Yeah.
Nope, gotta go. You know what I mean?
So
So
I think
that's what I
you
would
just have
recommend.
to stay the path, right?
Yeah,
Stay-
yeah. It's hard. It's a bad breakup, but it needs to happen.
We've all been there, right? Gia, I think, a lot of parents, at least my friends, have kids who are addicted to video games. That's the big one. Can you speak to, how do you know if your child's addicted? I mean, it's probably if you know your child, you already know, but how do you navigate that?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. And I think that sometimes we use addiction lightly, like to meet criteria for addiction does take quite many behaviors. It's about consistency, frequency, all of that. But it's also looking at your genetic predisposition, and so some kids are already going to be more susceptible because of genetics. And so it's being aware of that as a parent and being able to navigate some of those things. I think when people say addiction, they might really be speaking more to like the red flags of what can I do as a parent, what's in my control to observe when I think that my child is, gaming too much or, on their phone too much. So things like spending more than 3 hours a day on social media outlets. We just know that the increase in the number of actual time spent is correlated with all those rises in anxiety and cyberbullying and things like that. So as I was talking about in the beginning, it's like using social media as a distraction or an escape when feeling uncomfortable versus using social media for what it's supposed to be, to connect and then disconnect. Noticing like mood shifts that are directly related to social media. So your child is getting extremely upset that they don't have enough likes or hearts or thumbs up, or that FOMO that happens, like I'm going to miss something. Self-esteem is negatively impacted due to social media use. Maybe your teen is starting to compare their image and lifestyle to others, and that's negatively affecting their mood. So that's where we can see issues with like body dysmorphia, especially with using filters, and so educating like what is real, and how are we also fostering healthy self-esteem and image and self-concept within the home. And then, of course, things like using social media to bully, that's going to be a huge red flag. And then that consistent irritability or literally fighting with you because they are unable to use their social media. I would say that's absolutely a red flag.
Are there rules that, that you would recommend? I mean, rules, that word is such a, it's such a negative. I wish there was, I'm sure there's another one, maybe you know it, but I like the contract idea that John had, but what would you recommend for families regarding social media and just screen time?
Absolutely. And I think what you're asking me kind of is like, what are some like family recommendations for balance? So like, how are we always using really anything in life in moderation? So, like we really shouldn't be waking up and turning right to like our phones. So the most important screen-free times, setting those, so not waking up, not going to bed with it. Absolutely parents being involved in that, whatever you dictate to your kids, you are modeling yourself. Things like permissions to download apps that needs to be approved by parents, no hidden passwords, disabling privacy browsing windows when possible, discouraging multitasking. I think with distance learning, we are tasking our kids with a lot, but when we're eating and doing homework and conversing, it's very difficult for anyone to be able to manage all of that. Implementing just screen-free days. There is research that says that I think they did a study just this year that people who deactivated their Facebook account for a month reported lower levels of depression and anxiety, and just an overall increase in happiness and life satisfaction. And that's adults and teens, and then I think that there's great, like we've talked about the positives, there's great, websites like that'snotcool.com. So this is a website for 13 to 18-year-olds. It's becoming have your kid become an ambassador for teen violence prevention, educate them about ways to use social media proactively. And I think a huge way that we can also do this as parents is increasing the social emotional health in our children. So our children being able to learn impulse control skills at a very young age is what's going to follow them throughout their life, so they can be able to intrinsically navigate those pros and cons about, am I on it too much? I'm noticing that I'm becoming really obsessive with, how many likes are happening, or I really want to see what all my friends are doing, and so I know we kind of really talk a lot about the social emotional programs in our schools. It's something that Coronado Safe, we are so passionate about, but it's that's ultimately where we want our kids to get. Mm-hmm. How can I critically think myself and use my own emotional self-regulation skills so I can not fall victim to, I think, some of the things that can happen.
Are there any policies within the school district that you know of, Karen, that helps? Because I think are some of the clubs using social media as a way to interact, or I don't know what if you know, or I don't know. So I was wondering.
So I'll speak for the middle school. Okay. So one of the things with our associated student body, so that we can continue to be connected with everyone, especially during the pandemic, a conversation came up last year saying, well, should we start an Instagram? Karen, should we start an Instagram page? And I said, no, that's absolutely not happening. We have a platform, PowerSchool, which is our learning management system, which every student uses for their classes. And I said, I'll make sure that you get a new page, and that's where we will have our social media platform in a venue that is accessible to every student, mm-hmm. and is regulated by the school. And so it has been wonderful to see all of the great sharing that has gone on in that venue. The high school has an Instagram page, but it's run by the associated student body. And a lot of the high school kids, they do have social media, I do not believe that any child under the age of 15, 14 should have any sort of social media. Mm-hmm. Watching the statistics for years and years of the increase in anxiety for middle school kids between ages 11 and 14, it's mind blowing. For those of you out there that have kids that are that age, or you've had kids go through your home at that age, you know how challenging that time is to begin with. So yeah. Adding something else to it is just even more challenging. I just wanted to jump in and say really quickly one other thing in addition to what Gia had said. For years and years, I've been saying, at night, take your kid's phone away. I know that they tell you, I need it as an alarm clock. You know what? 10 o'clock, you and your children, you have one area in the living room. It's got 4 or 5 plugs, whatever you need. Everyone plugs their phone in at the same time. You go to bed without your phone. You wake up in the morning, you don't have your phone. It is so incredibly valuable. And I will never forget the family that came back to me about 4 years ago and said, Karen, we did that and it's changed all of our lives. And it really does. So that's one thing that really I think is so incredibly important to do too.
Yeah, I think it's good advice for everyone, not just myself included. So I know we have a link and there's a quick survey we wanted people to take. Alexis asked, she has that to share. No? Oh, yeah, but you can, okay, we'll put the slide up. Do you have the slide up? Okay, we'll put the slide in the chat, and then there's information on Coronado Safe, and if you have additional questions that you need answered, or you want to talk offline to someone, or you're interested in counseling services or the programs that they provide, reach out to them, and that they will be there for that. It's a great way to get your personal questions answered if we didn't touch on it today. Before we go, we have about 5 more minutes left, and then if there's time, we will hang out if people want to stay on, but we're on till 12:15 officially. There was a final question, and we've talked a lot about a lot of things, but if you had a final thought or a takeaway for the community, what would it be? And John, I'll start with you, and we'll go around the horn.
That's it. It's good. Well, a lot of them was like, for me, the phones out of the bedroom's important, but
Yeah.
tagging on what Gia said earlier, I've been telling kids for a long time, embrace awkward moments. Like, middle school should be awkward. That's part of life. And when you're looking down at your phone, yeah, it's giving you that sense of, I don't have to worry about being awkward. And so a lot of people, like my son has come home complaining about, like all the kids just to do this and I'm just not on one because he's got a flip phone. Yeah, they still make those. And I told him it's okay. That's part of middle school. You're trying to fit in. That's what life is. And so, yeah, it's easy as a parent, like parents, it's so easy to buy the phone and just give it to them and be the hero. But I'll leave you with this. I know when I was a kid, I watched a movie with my dad in black and white. And I was sitting there and all of a sudden the doctor takes out a cigar and he's in the doctor's office and he's like, yeah, it's a boy. I was like, why is he smoking? Doesn't he know that's dangerous? And my dad looked at me and said, son, it was a different time. And I was like, oh, well, that's how they're going to look at us giving kids cell phones and social media, sort of what Karen said, which is, wait, they didn't know how much damage and how it was affecting them psychologically? No. And it really pains me when I watch like little toddlers on an iPad. And I have friends and family, I'm like, I'm telling you, it's making your life easier now.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at I'm not even talking about my kids. My attention span has gone down. And this is the one last thing I would say. Like, I'll watch a movie and all of a sudden feel the urge, I need to pick up a phone.
Yeah.
I can't just watch a movie. So I guarantee there's people watching this right now and they're on their phone while they're doing this.
Yep. There are.
One screen at a time would be something I would say. One screen at a time, no matter what you're doing. And we're all guilty of it. We all have gotten bored in that moment and been like,
I know.
So that would be my takeaway. One screen at a time, embrace the awkward moments is a wonderful thing.
I love that. Karen?
I would just say educate yourself, parents, educate yourself. If you don't know how to do all this navigation, and you're never going to be as quick as the kids are. I mean, they are amazing, and they teach us how to do things, but educate yourself, find people that can show you, ask your kids to show you. There are classes, there are people, there are resources out there. Go to commonsensemedia.com, I believe it is, and check out the resources there. Educate yourself because you need to know what's going on, and because that's really, really important.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a family. It can be a family together movement, not necessarily a family fight, right? It can be like, we're going to do this together, and rather than the parent versus the child, or which I feel like it often sometimes feels like. Gia, how about you from a mental health place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think sometimes parents, like John was hinting at this, that parents get maybe a little bit nervous. Like, I don't want to have this argument. Like, I don't want to have this fight. But just to remember, home is still the strongest influence over our children, even more than technology, even more than their peers, you know? And so how you talk to your kids about social media and technology is the number one thing in your control. So like being proactive, being consistent. I had years ago, before I was at Coronado Safe, I had a 15-year-old, her grades were really starting to go down. She was just on her phone all the time. It was really infecting a lot of areas in her life. Her mom was really nervous. She was a single mom about taking it away, was like, what am I gonna do? And, you know, I worked with her a lot on being able to set that boundary. She ended up taking her daughter's phone away for a whole week. And when I checked back in with the daughter a week later, the 15-year-old, she said, I'm actually glad. Like, I'm actually glad my mom did this, because it forced me to realize that, like, it took away some of that anxiety. Like, I just knew that I didn't have to like turn to my phone, you know, and that I didn't have to have all of those like perseverating thoughts in my head about what everyone is doing or what I'm missing out on. And she's like, and it actually made me way more productive. So, you know, it's like, so of course, as a clinician, I think subconsciously our kids do want parents to set those boundaries and set those limits. We always talk about kids thrive on structure and routine, you know, and there's proof in the pudding. So that's my takeaway.
Oh, well, I love that. And I think you know, I love the boundary part, because I mean, even, you know, having a 5-year-old, I remember, you know, in the toddler stage, they always say like, create the boundary. They want that. And I think, you know, it makes sense that it would continue on in, you know, especially in when you have outside influence, such as your friends and your friends' parents, who might run a different ship, or probably run a different ship than you do. And, you know, that challenge and everything. I think this has been really great. I want to see if we have the slide now that we can put up, that we're going to share our screen. And I just want to remind people that, again, if you have questions, or you are, you know, you need someone to talk to, or want to learn more about the programs that SAFE offers, the website is coronadosafe.org. There's an email there, info@coronadosafe.org, phone number 619-522-6884. You can find us on social media at Coronado Safe. Lots of programs that are coming up. And more importantly, though, if you need any sort of counseling service or ways to navigate, you know, the screen time and any sort of addictions that you might think have, you know, put your child in a precarious position, please do reach out, because it's a great resource in Coronado. Thank you so much to the panel. I thought it was really great. I feel like we could talk about this forever, because there's so much, and the credits were great. I thought in the movie, when, you know, it was interesting how they gave all those tips, but I thought now that you guys gave them as well, and hopefully people will be able to take away and learn from it. So thank you. Thank you to the Coronado Island Film Festival, and that is our program today. Did we want to stay on a little bit and to see if anyone has questions, or if they can log off now if they?
I put in, they can email us.
Okay, they can
Email us questions.
Okay, go ahead, and if you would like, you can email questions, and we'll have someone get back to you with